How's it going, everybody? It's Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast, with your next installment of my BN1 restoration. So we've been running her and getting her nicely tuned up and sorting out all the leaks. And as you can see, I've got some of the interior installed here. I'll go through a bit of that. And also, as you can see, I've had to take the rad out because of another leak, but I'll get into that as well. Anyway, let's get into it. Hey everyone, so just doing some final little detail additions and little repairs and that. I've been having a problem with my carburetor linkage here. It's really hard to tell, but if you look at this rod coming down where it turns and goes into this link pin at the bottom, and that rod controls the little cam for your idle speed. So you can see the rod goes into the cam. Well, first thing, there's 3 different holes on that cam, and I had it in the bottom, the first hole, and it should actually be in the second hole, I found out. So I had to adjust that. That allowed me to get my revs down finally. But the other problem I've been having is where it goes into this pin at the bottom, the rod just does an L, and the hole in that pin is large enough that it just goes around the edge of the L and you know, makes the rod totally inoperable, because it's just going up and down through the rod. It's not actually engaging the rod. So what I've done is I've added another small circlet thing to prevent it from turning and going up the rod. So it holds that pin, and then of course I've got a cotter pin on the other end like it always had. But the double pin there is going to hold it better. So that's one thing I've just done, and now I'm starting to fit the air filters finally. One thing I've noticed is there was a little gap. If you look down, see? There's the gap. So that's no good. So I've got to take these off and tap them flush on a flat piece of steel, because it seems they're both a little bit bowed. You can see a little bit of light through that one as well. So little things that make a difference. And then with those air filters, as you can see, of course I restored these and they've been washed out in petrol and Varsol and then dried. And now I've soaked them in oil and let them drain overnight. So now they're ready to install. As per, that's what they say to do in the manual. So, what else have I done? So, I made myself a little stamp for doing these numbers to finish off these hoses finally. Took a while to carve the little stamp, but it turned out really nice. And those hoses look a lot more accurate now. You can see here's the little stamp that I made. Just hand carved it out of an eraser. Of course, I did it backwards the first time. You have to do a mirror image, obviously, when you're stamping it. But we got it right eventually. But yeah, they came out pretty nicely. And I don't know if I pointed out these, I had to replace both the oil pressure line and the fuel flex line hoses. My originals were just not holding pressure, so I found some decent looking ones, and then just made the ends of them brass and then added the little yellow Petroflex logo on them, and they look quite convincing. So there's the fuel line one down there. You can see with its little Petroflex line. So those are looking really good. And these are all just little final details I'm sorting out now. She's running really well, so she'll be going back to the body shop on Monday. So this is my last weekend with the car before it's out of here for a few weeks getting painted. And of course, once the body's on, it's going to be a lot more difficult to access some of these areas. So best get it nicely tuned and happy now. Also, I'm sure you noticed, I've changed this hose back again. I just have not been able to find one that I'm happy with that looks like that early BN1 style. I'll show you a picture. This is correct for what they eventually switched into on the BN1, and no one knows exactly what date, what car number they did change to this hose, but as I've pointed out before, my car did have evidence of that style of hose. Here, I'll just, right here. So this is what came off of my car, which is totally that type of hose there. But I've seen other cars built before and after my car that had that other, the accordion style hose. So I just haven't been able to find one that looks close enough, so I've decided to go back to this one. This one at least is correct, could be correct, and yeah, unless there's definitive proof, no one can tell me otherwise. So, yeah, what else? Yeah, she's looking really good. Today I think I plan on giving her one last run potentially if the rain clears up. I'd like to try and shift through some of the gears and just go up to the end of the road and back, if I can get away with it. But, so I'm gonna just temporarily close in the gearbox tunnel there just to make it safer so the drive shaft's not spinning beside your elbow. So I'll be offering up the tunnel and finding its screw holes and just temporarily screwing it in place. And here we go with the air filters now fully installed, and they're properly oiled and ready to go. So she's looking beautiful, ready to have the body reassembled. All right, so giving her full choke. Let's see how she goes. Beautiful. All right, so I've just temporarily installed the tunnel sections and the battery box lid. And wow, look at that. Just beautiful. Oh, this is going to be such a good car once it's all together. I look forward to installing my interior trim. But yeah, offered that up. Fits just beautifully. So that front panel just screws in 6 screws going into the front there. That is the BN1 style. BN2s had a totally different panel for that kind of wrapped around the sides, and so BN1s are quite unique. This is what I call the second style tunnel for BN1s. There were 3. The first style was only on the pre-production cars and maybe the first 100 or so production cars. And it was quite different around this gear shift housing. The whole tunnel was just a half cylinder shape, and then it had like a little half cylinder cup sticking out like this for the gear shift, and quite different. And then, so this being the second style, it's this pressed aluminum panel. It's 2 pieces that are riveted together down the center. And it's distinct in that right here, where it does a dive down, a flat, this is perfectly flat going straight down. And so that's the second style. You can see how flat that is. But this style apparently eventually started having problems because the overdrive solenoid just under the surface here was shorting out on this. If you hit any good bumps, it might cause them to rub. So they changed this style to a third style, and they added a hump. There's a big lump on the third style that clears that overdrive solenoid a bit better. Other than that, it's the same panel, but with the third style, they also changed the upholstery, whereas this is one piece of carpet with a teardrop cutout for that. The third style, they did it in two pieces of carpet, this bottom one being a separate one, and they joined them like this. There was two seams there. You'd see a seam right here and here separating the two pieces. So those are the three styles of BN1 carpet and tunnel. Of course, this rear section will all be, you've got this removable section here to get at the drive shaft, but the armrest covers that whole area. Yeah, so she's looking really good. Hopefully if the sun clears up today, we can take her out for a little spin. But hold me if it clears up. So she's running really well. She's ready to go back to the paint shop. I've cured pretty much all the leaks. The only leak that I think is common to most hundreds is the bell housing where the gearbox meets the engine. There's a small drift there, and that's because these four-cylinder engines never had a proper rear main seal. It was one of those reverse scroll seals, so when it's running, it's funneling oil back into the engine, but when it's not running, it can just trickle out that scroll seal at the back and make a nice little drip on the floor. And if you look, you can see there's that this cotter pin that sticks out with its feet. They all had that, and that's so that that's your drip hole, because they anticipate this filling up with some oil, and so there's always a drip right there, and this thing is always dripping a little bit. Not huge amounts, but enough. And so just have to keep an eye on it and make sure to bring a rag for protecting the floor when you're in other people's garages. Other than that, it turns out I must have a pinhole leak somewhere along this bottom edge, because after I've run it every time, it seems while it's running, there's no leaks whatsoever from the rad. But as soon as I shut it off and it sits overnight, I end up with a tiny puddle on the floor, like, 10 or 12 drops worth. But this little channel fills up with coolant overnight and then eventually drips. But it takes all night for it to fill up. It's not a very deep channel, so there must be a pinhole in the solder there, which is annoying because I sent this rad into Townside Automotive to have it pressure tested, and they went over the whole thing and said it's good to go. So there shouldn't be any leaks, but it may also, I've been trying to keep an eye on it. It may be coming from that rad hose and just dripping down and filling that trough. It's really hard to tell. I wrapped a paper towel around that and left it overnight, and the paper towel stayed dry, and yet that trough seemed to fill up. And I'm not sure if it somehow missed the paper towel, but yeah, something is leaking enough to fill that trough overnight, sort of thing. So at this point, I think I'm gonna leave it. It's not enough to, it's empty right now after having run it. There's nothing noticeable. Well, actually, no, you can see it right there. Little bit of wet. And yeah, maybe it is coming from this rad hose somehow. It's gotta be. Well, I identified the leak in the rad. It was not from the hose. It was indeed from that little trough along the top of the tank. There's some pinholes there, and well, it just won't do. It just kept coming out, especially once you get it up to temperature. It's coming out of there too much, and we can't have that. So out the rad came, and interestingly enough, I had a brand new drain valve on the bottom of the rad, and I went to drain the system and opened up the valve and nothing came out. So I had to drain most of it using the tap on the side of the block down there. There it is. yeah, the best way to do that is use this kind of a funnel under it and just direct it to a pan underneath. And I was able to drain, 3/4 of the system through that tap, and then the rest came slushing out when I removed the lower rad hose. But it wasn't too bad of a mess. I had a container under it. But as it turns out, the drain valve had a little, I'll show you right here. The drain valve had this little plug in the top of the new valve, which I didn't even know. So it has a little knurled edge, so you gotta pull this plug out of the top of the valve before you put it into the bottom of the rad. Otherwise the valve is capped off and doesn't work. So, well, at least I figured that out for the next time. Yeah, this is still booked in to go to Jetstream on Monday. We'll get the body assembled and get her painted, and meanwhile, I'll have the rad redone and get it properly sealed and pressure tested again, and repaint it and reinstall it. So it shouldn't be too bad. It's just the 4 bolts and of course those rad hoses, and luckily I've got a bunch more of those original type clamps. So shouldn't be too bad, even with the body on, should be able to get it in there. So it is what it is, but everything else is going well. She's running really well. Once we get that leak solved on the rad, we'll be good to go. And exciting day the other day, I went and picked up my grill from the chrome shop. So if you follow my blog, we fit this to the car and got it to be a perfect fit while it was still in its bare brass state. It's always something you want to do with your chrome pieces, is fit them while they're in bare brass, and then have the final chroming done after they're a perfect fit. Because these grills were all individually made for the cars, and no two are exactly the same in the way that they fit. So it's always good to offer them up and get a nice snug fit. But this came out beautifully. I've gone with the original chrome effect, where it's double shiny chrome on the outside rim and satin chrome on the inside teeth, just as they did from the factory. So beautiful contrast there. And of course I got my original 100 flash logo. Just beautiful. Love the 100 grill. So I can't wait to fit that to the freshly painted car. Next few weeks, it's getting close. So in other good news, I just got back with my grill. I also had all my cockpit rails polished, and they did a beautiful job. I'm not gonna open them up, but you can see they're nice and shiny. They've got plastic on it, so it's hard to tell, but anyway, I'm gonna leave them wrapped up, because now that they're polished to a high mirror shine, I'm gonna be taking these and delivering them to a place on the mainland called Alltech Anodizing, and they do industrial stuff, aluminum anodizing process, so they don't do any sort of polishing. You have to have these already polished with all the scratches and that totally gone. These have to be a mirror-like shine when you drop them off. But then they add the anodizing, which is how these cockpit rails were originally finished. And so I'll be dropping those off later at the end of the week, and getting them all properly anodized. So that should be very nice. Of course, these cockpit rails, like many things on the car, are all numbered to the car. There's the 1221, each and every one of them. So these are the original ones to my car. So very nice. Get those anodized. So that's a wrap for another episode of my BN1 restoration. Hopefully next time I do a video, we'll be looking into paint and body assembly. And hopefully get that rad sorted out sooner than later so we can get that reinstalled. Anyway, I'm Geoff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast. We'll see you next time.